Thanks again, Troy, for joining us on the first episode of Trash Talk.
Hopefully we did a good job and have some interest that people think that it was productive.
Super excited to release the first episode of Trash Talk. We've recently recorded this in Dallas, so please enjoy the first episode of Trash Talk with Troy Lautenbach. Tell us a bit more about your journey in recycling. What inspired you to start Lautenbach Recycling with your brother?
First of all, thank you for having me. I have some big shoes to fill here as the first-time guest, and so I'll do my best here as my first time as well on a podcast. So thank you for entrusting me with this situation. April will be 34 years ago that I started the company. Actually, my brother came in 7 years after I started the company. Technically, the best move I ever made of all the moves I've ever made. But I was an unemployed college student at the time, or recently graduated college student. I didn't have any money to my name. I had a college loan that I needed to pay for and an old pickup truck, and at that time we were going through a small recession. Bush Sr. was going to try to get reelected. He did not get reelected, and part of the reason was, of course, that we went through a small recession at that time, and I had decided that I really wanted to I was interested in the waste industry, and we could talk about that in a little bit if you like, but my uncles had this idea. They were entrepreneurial dairymen, actually, and I grew up as a dairyman. And they had this idea of taking scrap drywall and blending it with sawdust and making cattle bedding out of it. And essentially, that's how I got my start. I needed a job, and so I went out and started working.
Recycling has been a hot topic in most recent years, and you've been in the business for decades. How have you seen it kind of evolve and change over the years?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I started, that was in 1991, and I was in a meeting earlier today, a board meeting, and we were talking about where recycling actually got its start. And the blue bin was started in Ontario, Canada. And the blue bin, of course, is what we refer to as the traditional curbside recycling. And that was in the early 80s, I think around 1983 or so. So I started in this, 7, 8 years later, which ironically, I'd never done the math until today. But it was really a niche kind of thing. There was not that many people into it that were really kind of into it. Were people that were a fringe group of maybe early what you'd call environmentalists, people that cared about the environment. They wanted to do good for the world. And I always said that, that was maybe 4% of the population at the time, at best. That's not what was driving me. I was driven by the fact that I think it's really interesting to try to come up with creative ways to keep things out of the landfill, find new homes for them, and do it in the most efficient possible way.
As a CEO of a recycling business, what does a typical day look like?
I'm fairly routine. It's an early start, usually somewhere between 5 and 6, depending on how early I got to bed the night before. I like to have a cup of coffee, and then it's reviewing all the national, I would say, email chains that are out there, Waste Dive and the GIE media stuff, Recycling Today and Construction Demolition Recycling Magazine, all of these news feeds, and I try to read quickly all of those, and then, of course, the national news and global news. And that's usually my first 30 to 45 minutes, hopefully. And then it's then get on with my day. My day is really unstructured. And so exercise is a really key component to that and trying to fit that in. So I kind of look at my calendar to see where there's a gap of maybe an hour and a half so I can quickly fit that in. But otherwise, it's meetings, mostly meetings and conversations. A lot of times it's a phone call with my brother while he's on his way to work, to the office, or myself on the way to the office. And then it's just various meetings from, our managers to vendors to anybody, employees, and then trying to fit the exercise in. And then that's the end of the day. Towards the end of the day, usually it's try to spend a little time and with my wife and have a conversation about how our day went.
I'm a huge believer of partnerships and collaborations as a business owner myself as well. What would you say were some of the key partnerships that kind of led to current success for Lautenbach Recycling?
Yeah, we like to say in our company that we are a partnership-based company. I think a lot of people probably say that, but we really, really value that. And what that means to us is whether it's our customers, our employees, or our vendors, we're in a partnership and everyone needs to be successful. You know, it's early on, it started out where, really I was a glorified sheetrock scrapper. My customers needed somewhere to get rid of material, which was drywall. I came up with a creative way to take care of it, and then I had to create a partnership with my outlets, which would be end markets, which were farmers that had a need for that. Make sure that I was able to do what I was going to say I was going to do, and that they did what they said that they could do. And building that trust over time has evolved, and I think that evolution is culminated into where we live and die by it, because our partnerships just continue to grow and opportunities come around. And when those opportunities come around, we can lean on either our vendor partnerships or our customer partnerships or our employees to get the job done.
Just moving on from there, a lot of people outside of a business can look at the success of a business, but they never quite see, what went into that and the journey you've been on. So what would you say have been some of the biggest challenges since starting in 1991 till today in this recycling business?
Challenges come in many different forms. From an employee all of a sudden leaving to a market shift. We were early on, I would say the first 15 years of business, we were really heavily dependent on just the construction and demolition recycling element of our business. And we all know about 07, 08, we had a major financial crisis that happened, and that the biggest impact was on the construction industry. We fortunately had a couple of lucky breaks, I would say. One was that we were in the process of acquiring a piece of property. We were outgrowing where we were, and we needed to be in a better spot. And so we were in expansion mode. Of course, the construction business was very busy at that time, so we had plenty of business to take care of, and so we needed to expand. We actually had put an offer on a piece of property that they took a different offer than ours, which actually turned out better for us because the markets the financial market hit just after that. So that was a lucky break. But also about the same time, I mentioned earlier in the podcast that I get up every morning and I read about what's going on in the world, and it's really critical, I feel, to be a good leader is to have your finger really on tap on what's going on out there. And so at that time, we were hearing and looking and seeing what's going around in about September, November of 07, my brother and I looked at each other and we said, we've got to get as lean as we possibly can right now because we don't know where things are going because it really feels uncertain right now. And so that's what we did. We evaluated every single element of the company, which was a lot different back then. It was a lot easier to do than we are today. Every haul, we did price increases. We put a freeze on any kind of hiring. We put a freeze on any kind of purchases. And I would say by mid-February of 08, we really had leaned out as much as possible, got rid of any kind of extra employees that we really didn't need anymore. And then, boy, everything just started crashing down in 08. And it was just a hunker down moment for us through 08. But being lean like that really got us in a position to be able to weather that storm. And by 09, we actually located our new facility, which was a greenfield, and built that up to where our headquarters are today. So that was a challenging moment, but also, we have a saying that we like to say, all adversity creates opportunity for us. And we like to look at it that way, that we might be in an adverse time, but where's the opportunity there? So we're constantly looking at that. Another thing that was difficult was when China did the green sword thing, and we also operate. We're about 10 years into a contract with the San Juan County in the Puget Sound, which is a chain of islands in the Puget Sound in Washington State. And so we run a small transfer station out there. And we are the private contractor to the county and the town of Friday Harbor to operate their transfer station. And during that time of the China sword, all of a sudden there was that huge disruption in end markets for curbside recyclables, which we collect at the transfer station. Our service provider, who was taking our material at the time, was the one that was majorly disrupted because that was their part of their end markets, and they no longer had a home for their material. So they basically cut off all outside parties coming to their MRF, and all of a sudden we didn't have a home for our material. And then we had to go to the community and say, we have to cut off the community from taking your material. And one of the wonderful things about the small communities of the San Juan Islands is that they are very, very environmentally passionate. And all of a sudden to cut off recycling for them was something that they were not happy about. We had to become very proactive around making sure that we communicated the best we could with them, dispel any kind of rumors that start to happen that we are just doing it, trying to be profit mongering, et cetera. And so we really, really focused on being a good community member and being transparent as to what was going on. And we only had about a month and a half of disruption. And luckily, the MRF that we hauled our material to, because we were a good partner with them and had a good trusting relationship, they were able to turn back adjust and shift some end market things for them, and they were able to open the doors again to us. So we were able to continue to do that. Now the pricing changed a little bit, but we were able to weather that storm. Those were two the major ones. I'm trying to think of any other, disruptions. The other ones are, basically just things that come along and happen. I mean, just the tariffs that are happening currently right now is a disruption to us. We haul some products out of Canada, and the tariffs are changing the economics of that, and we are uncertain where that's all going to land after that. And it's a good percentage of revenue that we are currently doing that realistically is probably going to go away.
I really liked what you said there, by the way, about turning adversity into opportunity. I think that's a really powerful thing as any business owner should look to do. I know previously we touched on regulations in Washington State, and they're quite strict, should we call it? Has that been more introduced over since 1991, or has that slowly been introduced, the kind of strict regulations on recycling? And how has that kind of impacted your operations?
Yeah, regulations. That is something that I'm very passionate about. In our communications earlier, I said to you, I have this thing that I say that we need the regulators and the regulators need us, right? And if we have that kind of attitude, that means we need to collaborate, we need to work together, and we need to come up with solutions together as we try to do things. They want to protect the environment and human health, which I do as well. But I also have a business that I need to run. Regulation is constantly changing. We just, in our state, went through an industrial stormwater rulemaking process over the last 12 months. We were involved in that, and we actually are still really involved in the final product. One of the things that happens is during that process, if the communications between the operators and the regulatory body isn't well, there could be some adverse effects that could happen that can really disrupt the marketplace. And to walk that back sometimes can be very difficult. They are not operators. They don't know what their decisions that are they're going to make, how that will impact your industry. And it's our job to make sure that we let them know what those impacts could look like. And we have to be open to what they're trying to do and what they see as possible environmental exposure. And we need to try to help mitigate that as well. That's our responsibility. And so it's really a partnership that it has to be a strong partnership. I really believe if you're going to be in this industry, you have to have somebody focused on keeping a very good, positive relationship between your various regulators and I would say management of the company.
And contamination is a big issue in recycling. How do you mitigate that with your customers?
Well, education. That's the first place you start. You try to educate them as to what a little bit of effort on their end could make it easier on our end to process that material. Or, the way that they prepare recyclables, the way that they maybe put contaminants into recyclables. The organics, we are in the organics realm as well. We own a composting company, Skagit Soils. And ironically, my son just became the manager of it, which I'm really proud of. But our number one issue is trying to get plastic out of compost, right? Because who's our end user? Well, you and mom and pops that want to put compost in their gardens, and they're sitting outside in their lawn, sitting in their lawn chairs, and they're looking at their wonderful flower gardens, and they've just spread a bunch of compost out there. The last thing they want to see is pieces of plastic. But in our state, we've decided that, we really want to make sure and keep organics out of the landfill. Well, the organics then need to go to one of two places, and one is composting, which what we do, and the other is anaerobic digestion. Well, in both cases, you still have your solids that are left over, and if there's plastics in there, that really becomes an issue. And every time that you're trying to remove those plastics, it just becomes more expensive. And at the end of the day, the dollar is the most powerful portion of encouraging people to not. If you're passionate about recycling, you want to recycle, then do it right, because it'll make it cheaper and easier for everyone. It takes a little bit of effort. Recycling, there's a couple things about recycling that is, it's not cheaper than the landfill. It really isn't. Sometimes it is. Different commodities are, but a lot of times it's not. And it's the right thing to do. And the more effort you put into it, the better off you are. I mean, when I open up my Amazon package and there's tape around the box, if I'm taking that box apart, I don't usually just grab a scissors or a box cutter and open it up that way. I usually try to see if I can take the tape off and just peel the tape back, and that's a tiny bit of effort, right? But that means the mill, the end user of that cardboard, is not going to have to spend more time trying to get the adhesive and the tape out of the fiber that they're going to reclaim and put into new boxes. So contamination is a tough thing, but it really doesn't take a whole lot of effort, I feel, for the public to be able to just put a little effort in and keep contamination out. It just goes a long, long ways for all of us. And paying attention to, like we have a plastic sack ban in our state.
Yeah.
Our city, city of Bellingham, Washington, was one of the if either was or is one of the first cities to ban that. And I remember this is, I think, in 2012, so 12, 13 years ago. And I remember it happening. I'm going, boy, this is really this is going to be really difficult. And then now I have sacks in my truck, and when I go to the grocery store, and if for some reason I either forgot the bag in my truck or I didn't put them back in my truck after I got home, I almost feel naked. It's a weird feeling, and I'm so used to it. And what's happened too is now is like, boy, you can get so much more in these canvas sacks, or than you can in those plastic sacks. And ask anybody that runs we don't have a curbside traditional single stream MRF, material recovery facility, but plastic sacks in the material recovery facility costs a lot of labor and downtime to clean them off the screens. Right? It's really a contamination issue. And then on the other end, even like if you've ever been by a landfill, they actually put these huge windscreens up around the landfill so that these plastic sacks aren't just getting caught in the wind and flying into the air and contaminating the environment. So that effort of being able to eliminate those and go towards using your own bags, or if you still use the plastic bags, bag them up, put them together, and put them in a plastic bag reclamation system. Usually at the grocery store that you're at, they usually have that. It's a very small effort, but with a little bit of effort, makes recycling go a lot further.
Interesting what you say there. In Europe, for example, they have landfill taxes, and the landfill taxes amount to cost just as much as recycling in the end. So there's a bit of an incentive there for recyclers themselves to actually go for that option. Do you think there needs to be a kind of similar thing introduced in certain states, or even on a federal level, to introduce some sort of taxes to incentivize businesses to recycle more?
That's a fun question. I'm a business owner, first of all, right? Do I like taxes? No, I don't. But I do see that taxes can incentivize people to try to do things. Early on in my career, I used to say often, because, I'll back up a little bit. At the end of the day, it used to be all around, if you can do stuff for somebody that's cheaper than them going to the landfill to get rid of something, right? When you do that, you have an ability to recycle stuff. It's very hard to charge somebody more to take care of their stuff than it would be for them to be able to just go to the landfill. Now that's shifted a bit because of people with climate change and all of these, huge weather events that we're having. You see people having a desire to do something about it, right? And so that's driving our industry, and it's really, really welcomed. And I used to say, if you want to increase recyclability of things, tax the heck out of landfills, and put a sin tax on it, right? I mean, I could go on and on about that whole tax element, because in our state, we have a solid waste fund tax that goes out there for every bit of garbage that we collect at the transfer station. But if you wanted to increase recycling, you could up that even further, and now you have more margin to be able to play to invest in capital projects to be able to pull that material out or develop end markets. It's the economics change a lot when you throw that higher number in there as to what you're competing with. It's changed a little bit because of what I said around, being people have more desire to do the right thing. It depends where you are in the nation as well. The Midwest is difficult because, landfill prices there are extremely low, right? Yeah. And it's an interesting concept, right? I mean, to do that, but I'm not about higher taxes, but I can see where it could be a tool, a mechanism to increase recycling.
And moving on to kind of opportunities, what do you see currently as the biggest opportunities in recycling today?
The opportunities, it all depends whether we're talking about, different regions. I just referred to different places in the United States. And I was just speaking with a gentleman this morning about recycling, and recycling's really around, it's regional. It's very regional, and it's usually about a 90-mile radius because trucking is such a huge element of that. Yeah. But the biggest opportunities, depending on where you're at, I would say the two general streams of material that I see a lot of energy around is one, organics, right? Keeping organics out of the landfill. Organics going to the landfill creates methane gas. Methane gas is a climate change gas. The other element is construction and demolition recycling. I'm here at our annual conference, just cycling off as a board member. I've been on the board for, I don't even know, 15 years, 15 plus years, I guess. But I'm very passionate about it. It's really organics and C&D, construction demolition, is really low-hanging fruit. I think there's a lot of energy around plastic recycling because plastics are everywhere. There's a lot of technologies that people are working on, from gasification to putting it into new resins to new plastics, and they're trying very hard at that. And I think you're going to see some successful things come online over the next few years where I think you're going to see that really happen, and then maybe they can scale that. But it's a slow process. It's been taking a while.
And how is technology changing the way businesses operate in the recycling industry? For example, Lautenbach, over the 30 plus years, how has new technology changed the way that you operate?
Well, when I started the company, cell phones were a great big box in a car, which I couldn't afford and didn't have. So my technology was, I had an answering machine in my home office that if there was a message on there, it would pick up after 2 rings. And if there wasn't, it would go to 4 rings before you could leave a message. And my contractors would leave me messages. And so wherever I was, I had a pocket full of change, and I would stop by a payphone and I would call my office. And if it rang after 2 rings, then I would punch in my code and get my message and then go take care of the job. And if it rang 4 times, there wasn't a message for me.
Yeah.
So that was the technology I had, and I didn't even have a PC at the time. I did my books by hand, did my own taxes my first year. And so evolution from that. Then I get a cell phone, and all of a sudden now I'm communicating with my customers, and that increased the ability, the efficiencies, right? That's the big thing. And you get a PC, and then I learned QuickBooks and put the QuickBooks on the PC, and it just evolved that way. And that's really the rudimentary first parts of technology changes for us. And then you start putting GPSs in trucks, and you have routes now, and you can find things so much easier, because even coming here today, right, I had my wave going, and I knew exactly how long it was going to take me, and it's so dependable. It's incredible what we have for technology. We now are using cameras in our trucks. We did not have them in a few years ago, and so we have a fleet of, I think, we're over 50 trucks. But it used to be that our truck could be in the middle of a freeway or in the middle lane, and somebody would do something erratic and hit our truck, and it was automatic. Our insurance is going to pay for it, even though our driver did nothing wrong.
Right.
Now there's cameras in every one of those trucks. Now the drivers were a little reluctant at first, because why are you checking on me and whatnot? And we had to really message to them, no, this is for you, to protect you and your safe ability to drive this truck. And that's really changed things for us. The ability to dispatch via, technology, software, that's helped. Scaling software has really helped. You mentioned a challenge, though. We had a technology change that we did, which we decided to change accounting software, and because I try to be professional. I'm not going to badmouth the company that I went to. I don't think that's fair, although I think it is fair because it's by far the most challenging thing that we've ever gone through as a company, and it cost us a lot of money, and it took us 3 years to recuperate from it. And I have no one to blame but myself and my brother, but our staff had a lot to do with that. Most of them are no longer with us, and it was the scariest, hardest thing that we've ever gone through. And I tell that story because of all the things to do as a company. You always have to be looking at technology and how can you become more efficient and more effective with what you do when you're servicing your customers. But when you go to make that change, you can never be over diligent to get it right. You can't do it. We are right now changing our dispatching software, going to a new company, and we're very excited about it. It's a young startup company doing things much different in that technology change. But we're going to know where our trucks are all the time. We're going to know where our equipment is, our boxes. We are going to have real-time data constantly, and then we're going to be able to have data that we can assess what the costs were to service those customers in different regions. So it's worth it to do that technology. And now we're talking about AI, which is the latest thing that everyone's talking about, and we're utilizing it.
Yeah.
You know, we're utilizing the Copilot in our Microsoft suite right now. We have a great IT guy, Nick. He takes care of all of this for us, and every once in a while he comes with some new technologies. We utilize it, and it makes us a little more nimble, a little quicker, and it's kind of fun to watch. Although for me, it takes forever for me to remember how to do it and figure new things out. But boy, when I watch it work, I'm really impressed, and it really is fun to watch.
Going back to what you mentioned about the accounting software and it was a problem. What exactly happened with that?
I could go on about this a long time. I really could. It's, we were growing quickly. We were trying to gather data to be able to do our analysis for different divisions within our company. We really want to know each area of the company is its own business segment. And we want P&Ls, basic P&Ls for each segment, whether it's our construction demolition, I won't use acronyms, construction and demolition material recovery facility, which is 1 yard, right? Whether it's our fifth wheel transportation division, whether it's our San Juan Island transfer station. I can go on and on about all these different divisions. We really want to have basic P&Ls. I think we have 4 EINs, so 4 separate businesses, and they all interact with each other. So you have that accounting element of how one does work for the other and how do you account for that. So it was getting very complex. Our staff came to us and said, we need some different technology. And my brother and I, we pushed back. And at the time, we were really in this mode of going, you know what? We kind of want to, it's important for people to grow within a company and to take ownership and be able to have their own lanes to be able to be successful. And we were trying to really nourish that. We allowed them to talk us into making this change, and then we allowed them to do it without us being hands-on during that process. I have a good friend of mine. He says, "Look, you took your hands off the wheel for a minute, and frankly, we almost went off a cliff." And for people that are out there that are business owner, for the first time in my entire career, we had a cash flow issue. Right, and a basic thing of getting invoices out wasn't happening. 2 months after we went live. So the preparation wasn't done. I should have consulted others and said, hey, what are the pitfalls? What are the things? What are the problems that you had? And now I can talk ad nauseum to people about don't do this, don't do that. My biggest piece of advice is, look, whatever resources it takes, do it, but run each system side by side till the new system is working flawlessly. And then you can shut down the old system. But otherwise, leave it in place. I could go on and on about the things that happen. I mean, the cash flow was one thing. Running a company without having financial data in front of you to be able to run that is extremely scary. We call it being in the dark. We were in the dark for a substantial amount of time. We survived, luckily, but we're out of that, and we aren't with the company that we originally. We switched back to the original technology, and or not the original, an updated version of it, and it now is working for us and is getting the data that we want. And literally, it wasn't until we're closing out 24 right now and getting our taxes to our accountant, and it's like night and day compared to how we took care of 23.
Previously, we touched on environmentalism when we spoke a few weeks ago. How do you see that as an opportunity for Lautenbach Recycling and the growth of it since, of course, when you started in 1991?
Being in the evergreen state, we are very passionate about sustainability and doing the right thing. But sometimes, there's a big EPR movement right now, extended producer responsibility. Sorry about the acronyms.
That's okay.
And they're happening. I think we have 4 states. We are 6 states or 5 states, somewhere in there right now that are now have EPR laws in place. I think Minnesota was the last one last year that did it. We are very, very close. I think the Senate just passed it out of the Senate. It's over at the House now for Washington State, literally right now, and they are getting close to having an EPR bill put into place for Washington State. I worry about some of the ramifications of that in that, I mean, Washington State right now, we have depending on who you ask, I think we have a 45 to 50% recycle rate in our state right now, which is pretty good compared to just about anywhere else. This is a pretty radical change. I worry about change. I worry about the ramifications of it. I worry about somebody that doesn't know our business or the business of recycling coming along and telling us how to do it. Therein lies one of the things that are our fundamental values for our company, which is transparency and trust. I can go to environmentalists and say, look, we're doing everything that we can to make sure that we limit what we call residuals, which is what's left over after we've sorted through recyclables that go to the landfill, and do everything we can to keep that stuff out. You go back to the EPR stuff, I worry about whether or not what they have is these groups called the PRO, which is the Producer Responsibility Organization, which is a third party that goes between the manufacturers, which would be the people that make the packaging, and between them and the end processors, which would be us, and then negotiating, pricing all the way through. And it's very complex, but this whole process that happens, and I worry about the ability to basically start up and be able to work within the confines of what they're trying to do. And at the end of the day, you hear a lot of people that promote EPR that say it puts the responsibility on the manufacturer for creating sustainable packaging. And it also puts the cost bearing on them. Well, manufacturers aren't in the business to lose money. So if it's going to cost them more, it's going to go to the consumer anyways. Those are the things that I'm worried about, because they have really great intentions, but you have to be careful of it. Like we have a EPR bill that happen in our state for paint, right? A homeowner buys a can of paint, you buy, 5 gallons of paint, and you use 4 of it. Now you have that gallon that's left over. I mean, who doesn't have paint cans in their garage, right? Well, we came along, we said, we're going to have a paint bill and EPR for that, and we're going to make it so that consumers have an easy way to get rid of paint. I said, okay, no problem. Out on our transfer station, they asked us if we'd be a provider for that. We said, sure, no problem. They said, it won't cost you anything. I said, okay, no problem. We'll come and we'll get the containers of paint that you collect. I said, okay, are you going to pay our staff the training that we need to do to be able to handle that, or the time it takes when they have to hold the hands of the consumers that come across and put it in the containers? Oh, no, we're not going to do that. Well, I have to come up with a way to pay for that, right? So those are the kind of gaps that I worry about, that the people that are, I would say, environmentalism, trying to promote these good things, that they need to have, I would say, a better understanding of. We need to try to fill, or at least be fluid enough and flexible enough to bob and weave and change as we make these big changes.
Is there almost an expectation on you to kind of compensate for that?
Our employees are going to get paid, right? I can't run at a negative, right? Otherwise I go away because I have taxes to pay and whatnot. So I have to make up those funds somewhere. So what I do, I have to raise tip fees in other places for the other people that come into our facility that help offset the cost of that paint. Now it is so marginal, really. It doesn't really, it's more of the example, the principle of the matter, right, that I'm making, because it is very small. I mean, everybody could say, oh, that's a crappy example, Troy, but technically it's not, because there is a cost there. Yeah. All of the death by 1,000 cuts, right? I mean, that's what it's all about. And I bring these up because I want people to have awareness around it. I'm not saying that I'm opposed to these ideas of what people want to do. I'm not by any means wanting to get in the middle of that. I'm only wanting to heighten awareness around it. Just like when we talked about rulemaking and regulation, if I'm not at the table talking about the issues, and if people are not listening to that, we're not going to get anywhere, right? We have to work collaboratively. We have to listen to each other. One of the best things about being a leader in my mind is being able to listen. And if you're an environmentalist and you want to be a leader in that group, you have to be a good listener as well, right? And they have to be able to trust that what I'm saying isn't just trying to be self-serving and only about myself, and I'm trying to make as much money as I possibly can. That's not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to provide a good service at an honest price and be a transparent, good partner in the community.
So what's next for Lautenbach Recycling? Have you got any kind of upcoming initiatives or innovations that you're really excited about?
We live in Northwest Washington. We're about an hour and a half north of Seattle. Our headquarters is in a place called Mount Vernon, Washington, which is Skagit County, which is the second to last county before the very last northwest continental county in the United States, which is called Whatcom County, which is where I'm born and raised, and I still live there just on the south end because it's closer to work for me. And we have a few operations that have evolved up in Whatcom County over the last, I would say, 5 years. But the one thing that we don't have in Whatcom County is a vibrant C&D, construction, demolition, recycling facility. We provide roll-off boxes in Whatcom County and then haul them back to our Skagit County location for processing. But we don't have a facility where both contractors, homeowners can take down a fence in their backyard and load it in their pickup truck and haul it somewhere where it's going to get recycled in Whatcom County. Well, last July 1st, Tori and I closed on 25 acres. 12 of it's going to be mitigated for critical areas, so wetlands and such that we're going to develop. And the other 12 is going to be a construction and demolition recycling facility for the county. right on the north side of our biggest city, which is Bellingham, Washington. And it's very centrally located, and it's going to be a facility where people are going to be able to haul their construction and demolition material to. They're going to be able to haul their fibers, papers, plastics, cardboard. They're going to be able to haul roofing material, asphalt shingles. We're also going to be processing other recyclable materials there as well, metals. And then we have a storage container business. We're going to consolidate that, bring that over to that facility. So we're in the middle of permitting for that right now. Our goal is to have it fully operational by the end of 25. And it's something that the community, the environmental community, has really been pushing for. There are partners in the community. They've been pushing for it. They want to see it happen. We are having conversations with deconstruction companies about maybe having a reuse yard for building materials that is reusable. There's a nonprofit in Bellingham that's been doing it basically since I've been in business, the early 90s, called the Restore, and they do a fabulous job. We're having conversations with them about how we could have a collaborative approach to this and be a good partner with them to help push that along. So we're really excited about it. We're going to have a baler in there so we can bale cardboard and bale metal and pop cans and different things like that. We're exploring some glass crushing operations, or recycling opportunities. We really feel like it's something that the community really needs. It'll be the biggest and most vibrant recycling location in Whatcom County, where consumers will be able to handle so many different types of material. We're exploring maybe electronics as well. We have the very first EPR in Washington State was electronics recycling. We've had it for quite a few years. We're a service provider for that on San Juan Island. So the list goes on and on and on. And you talk about opportunities as an entrepreneur, getting up in the morning, reading about what the latest stuff is going on, and hey, could we do that here? That's what goes through our minds every day. And we feel like this new facility gives us the opportunity to explore all those different things. And the meanwhile, maybe pulling off some of the pressures of our headquarters in Mount Vernon and Skagit County to be able to capitalize on maybe some more market down south and run it through our Skagit County facility.
What advice would you give to someone who may be looking to start a recycling business?
My son is he's been the assistant manager, but one of our partners has just retired the first of the year. He said something to me the other day. He goes, Dad, you used to say that being a leader, being an owner, can be quite lonely at times. And he's experiencing that because he goes, I can't talk about the things that I'm dealing with the employees. If I'm frustrated about this or frustrated about that, I have to find somebody else to talk about. I says, yeah, you can call me or your mom or whoever you need to talk to about it. Your uncle, he loves to hear about those things as well, but you can't process that, right? And the other thing is that it's not over at 5:00. And it's not over when you go on vacation. It's not over when you enter a weekend. It's always with you. And whether or not you're dealing with something that's gone wrong or there's an emergency, we're a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation. We have trucks on the road every hour of the day, all year long, whether it's Christmas, Thanksgiving. That phone is next to my bed. I've been woken up in the middle of the night. I've had to take off and go get to a situation before it happens. That's the kind of dedication it takes for somebody that is wanting to start their own business. That's the way it is. It takes that kind of dedication.
And what's one thing you wish you'd known if you were to rewind back in 1991, what you know now?
One of the things that really affected me as a child growing up, I grew up as a dairy farmer. And my father, in the early 80s, when I was 14, 15 years old, when the interest rates spiked up to around 18%, something like that, we lost our dairy farm. We went through a bankruptcy. My dad had a mental breakdown during that time. It was super stressful. I was a freshman in high school trying to live through that situation, trying to have a life at school, but also needing to be at the farm working as much as I possibly could. And all the way through to where, I mean, literally the power company turned off the power to our house, and the church brought us groceries, so that was a very traumatic event. So my approach to business and life after that was very conservative, very, very risk averse. And so I think that took a lot of my confidence, and it took me a long time to build my confidence. And so I think early on, being a little bit more aggressive and taking a little more risk and being confident that the way that we were doing things and how we were doing them actually worked and were okay. And that probably would have served us better. But who knows? Because we've been successful and we are where we are, and I'm really extremely proud of where we are.
I know you mentioned earlier on two specific events like '08 and the accounting software situation. Were they, at any point during those times, did you have a thought of, we might not actually make it through this?
I was very worried, yes, whether or not we would make it or not. But we've always had this attitude, we don't have a choice. We're going to make it.
Yeah.
Right? We're going to do whatever we can to make it. And it's been times where, we had, what was it, 3-4 years ago when we had a truck driver shortage crisis. And we had some hauls that we were doing that had to be done. They were nighttime hauls. Well, for I think 3 weeks during the summer, my brother and I were in trucks all night.
Right.
And then we'd go home, sleep for about 4 or 5 hours, as much as we could, go through all our emails, meetings, do everything we could, maybe then get another nap and then get in the truck again, right? Failure's just not a choice sometimes. And you have to be ready to work as hard as you can to not fail. And when things get sideways, you have to have the makeup that, look, I'm going to work my ass off to not fail. It's just not an option. You can't fail. Now, you're going to have what we call failures where it's a disruption and things don't work, which is okay. You have to try things, right? But the failure of not being able to survive, that's just not an option.
And would you say some of that mindset comes from, your earlier years, as you mentioned, with your father's farm?
I've had a job since the 6th grade. My folks split up when I was in the 5th grade, and there was just not I grew up very, we always had a roof over our head. We had food on the table. But if I wanted a bicycle or if I wanted some shoes or clothes that looked like the other kids at school, I was working to earn a little bit of cash to be able to get that stuff. When I turned 16, I had $1,600 saved up that I went out and bought my car so I could now drive to work,
Yeah.
So it's always been, for me, what is it that I need to be able to survive the situation that I'm in if things go sideways, and I need to work through it. And I'm always calculating that in my mind. It's just always how I've been, I guess, how I survived when there was very little to have, and now even when I have, I'm wildly more successful than I ever imagined. My attitude when I started my company, or even younger, was that I wanted to have a different life than what I grew up in, and I wanted it different for my kids to grow up in a different feeling, different style than what I had growing up. Now, my life wasn't bad. I didn't hate it. I loved it, actually. I thought I had a lot of fun, and and I enjoyed my jobs, and I enjoyed my friends, and I enjoyed my life growing up. But I just had the attitude that it was going to be different for me when once I got out of, I went to college by accident. I didn't like school, but I knew how to milk cows. That's what I did in high school to earn money. And one day I decided, I know how to milk cows. I absolutely hate milking cows. I can always milk cows if I need to, so I'm going to go to college, and frankly, I'm just going to go party for a year. And I did. And but by spring quarter, I was, this is so much fun. I'm coming back here, and I made a deal with myself that I've had a job my whole life. I'm not going to work while I'm in college. I'm only going to work on breaks: spring break, winter break, summer break. And of course, I paid for my schooling. Of course, the government helped me as well, which gave me a whole nother perspective on social awareness. I would say that I'm pretty fiscally conservative, but socially moderate because of my experiences. And I had this one experience. I'm kind of wandering here. Hopefully that's okay. But I had an experience that one summer, I worked in the refineries for my uncle's business in the summertime, and there was a turnaround, and it was great money. And I took all the hours I could get. I was working, 80 hours a week, just an equipment operator, whether it was a loader or an excavator or a vacuum truck, and in the refineries you make good money. So I made, I think I made $8,000 or something. I made a lot of money, but I lost my financial aid because all of a sudden I was above the threshold of what it takes to be able to qualify for the financial aid. And it really put me in a hardship for that next year. And that never left me, right? And so having that empathy around those scenarios and ideas and things like that.
I know you mentioned before about kind of missing out on weekends and your phone's always on and always kind of having to be available. Were there any other kind of personal sacrifices you had to make? A lot of people don't quite understand what it takes to run a business, own a business, and the sacrifices that you have to make sometimes. You personally, have you had to make big sacrifices along the way in the last 34 years?
I think my kids could probably speak to that better than me. I put a narrative in my head as to how good a dad I was. I hope I was a great dad. I was, I was a coach at all the way through till they were in high school at lots of practices. I made all of I was always a volunteer for school trips and whatnot, anywhere I could be on that. Whenever you're doing that, you're still working as well. And so maybe not being present all the time. I can have times where all of a sudden my mind will go somewhere else, and my wife will say to me, did I lose you? Technically she has for a second, because my mind is thinking about fixing something or an event that maybe happened that the day, or an employee issue, or a regulatory issue that comes up. And that's kind of the sacrifice that happens when you're in the position that my brother and I am in.
Can you share a story of hiring a person and that had a big impact on the business?
We went through this technology change, and what that did is it solidified the team that we have right now. We have some people that weathered this storm with us, and they went through it with us. And we have this wonderful person in our company called, her name is Kristen. And I was one day venting around the fact that we went through, this stressful thing, technology change. And Tori and I have this thing where we want people to be as honest and transparent as they can with feedback, whatever they're thinking, what they're feeling. We need an open dialogue. And Kristen had to learn to trust that. And she's gotten to that place now where I don't have to worry at all. She's going to be able to tell us what she's thinking, which I love. I absolutely want it, because she's brilliant in the way that she thinks. She thinks different than we do. Yeah. And it's awesome because it's such an asset to the company. And she says to me, she goes, well, Troy, we all went through that as well, and we're still here. And I'm like, dang, I really missed the mark as a leader right that moment, right? Because I didn't show appreciation and what they meant. So now we have this team that's like this. And that's one example, and she's one example of that. And then recently we hired somebody that I've known in our industry, and this is the first time that we've done this, where we hired somebody that's in the industry that I've known for a very long time. I've always really respected him and appreciated how he approaches the way that he takes care of the way that he does business as a person. And he came to us 6 months ago, and maybe even longer, and we started talking about whether or not he, would like to come to work for us and what opportunities there might be. We went out on a limb and we hired him. His name is Tony. And what's been great is the first thing that Kristen says is, you know what, Troy, we now have somebody besides you and Tori to go to bounce things off because he knows this industry. Everybody else in our industry have been people that have learned it with us. We've taught, they've gone out and learned and evolved, but now we took an industry insider and put him in our company. He's our business development manager, really kind of leading up our sales team of things. And whenever there's some sort of issue that we need to work through, she does a lot with end markets and customer service and handling those teams. And she's like, I have somebody I can bounce things off, but the incredible part about it is that his personality meets our culture perfectly. And the element, I don't know if everybody believes this, but I sure believe it. The element of fitting in and culture is so critical to an organization and the health of that organization. Once you have friction, if you don't, address it, attack it, talk about it, figure it out, it'll just fester, right? It's like a cancer. You've got to have people that are all in together. If there's defensiveness, let's address that right away. There's no reason to be defensive. We don't want people to be defensive. We have an issue, which is we need to be a successful company, and we need to figure out the problems, and we need to work through them together. And so, those are a couple examples. We have our transportation manager, Jason. He's been with us forever. He was a truck driver for us. But now what he does is he's in our transportation manager. He's our driver's manager. So he really knows the elements of getting in a truck. He's been out there doing that for years, and he's been in this role of managing our drivers, which truck drivers are their own personality, let's say, right? So to be able to manage that is really great, and he's just a true Lautenbach guy, and he lives and breathes it. His phone's always ready to go to field a conversation and answer stuff. So I could go on and on about people in the company. The team that we have right now, going through a technological nightmare that we went through, the one thing that I've learned from that, and this is the opportunity, is it really solidifies your team. Adversity really can sometimes create, that opportunity of making you a much better person, right? I mean, we talk about the adverse child effects of things, of going through a hard, difficult thing. And after you go through it, you learn how you can be better. We have a great controller now. The accountant, he's got this accounting team that is so strong, right? It's the foundation. It's the foundation of the company, and all the numbers through there. The data is now coming together. We are in a position now where, we went through a really hard time, but boy, I tell you, we really improved and are a much better company than when we were going into that. So, and it's because of our people. People are everything. You're nothing without your people.
No, I completely agree. People, culture, especially when you're a 130 person company, things might be slightly different if you were 10,000 or 5,000 even, but as a small tight knit company, culture is so important. Whoever's walking through the door. You mentioned your most recent hire, someone from the industry, and the impact that they could make just so quickly, hit the ground running almost. Would you change your hiring strategy moving forwards, to incorporate more industry people, do you think, off the back of that hire?
It's ironic that you're asking this question because I'm in the middle of thinking about this, that how do we go about this? We have some operation things that we need to streamline. We need to work through, and I feel like if we found somebody that has some of that, MRF operating background, a materials yard manager, somebody that really knows logistics and the processing of materials and is passionate about that. We're very adamant about having good, clean, efficient operations, and our end markets, our vendors, the people that we do business with, they expect that as well. When you pull into our yard, we feel like you want to see one of the cleanest, effective looking operations you ever see. There's not junk and crap everywhere, right? There's not safety hazards. We have a safety manager. We're adamant about our safety training. All of these things are incredibly important. And so we're now in the process of exploring this idea of possibly bringing in somebody that can oversee some more operational type things. Some of our people, like my brother, I would say he's an operational guru. I would put him up against anybody when it comes to operations. He's a stickler. He's a numbers guy, loves the numbers, loves data, but he could use a little bit of help. We have somebody that Luke, who's worked with us since he was 16, and he's in his 40s. Or I think he just turned 40 this year. So and he's a perfect example of a MacGyver. Can operate, fix, figure out anything. Everybody on the team leans on him when Tori and I are not available or they don't want to bother us, because he'll figure it out, right? But we need to free him up, because we need to develop him a little bit more. So we need to get somebody that can work with him, that can oversee maybe the Bakerview, the new yard, that could really oversee all of the activity that's going to happen there with our oversight. So we are looking towards that. I am leaning towards actually trying to do that. Our community is small.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, we live in a very large nation. But I'm here at our, Construction Demolition Recycling Association meeting, C&D World, our annual conference, and it is very networking intense. I call them all of my friends. They're my family, and I can call on them anytime, any place, and they will help me in having solutions. But that's the extent of how many people really are out there. So, we are a membership of about 300 companies, and some of them are vendors, and they're not all just C&D recyclers,
No.
So the pool, and the last thing I want to do is go steal one of their operators, right? I that's not how we do business.
Yeah.
So the pool's not large, but I'm interested in exploring that, right? And I'm interested in using the culture, the Pacific Northwest carrots of, hey, maybe this is where somebody might want to come and live as well.
Interesting you say that, because of course recruitment is kind of my game at the moment. What's more interesting is what neighbouring kind of industries you have as well, and not just to C&D but recycling overall. You look at your kind of operations, as you mentioned there, when it comes to the trucking side of things and so on. There are a lot of industries where there's a lot of transferable skills, even if they don't necessarily have just a C&D specific kind of background. Would you say over the last 30 years, how has hiring kind of changed? Is it become easier? Is it more challenging? I know traditionally people stayed at businesses for generations and didn't really ever think about leaving businesses at all. But from your perspective, over the past kind of 30 plus years, how has hiring been?
The internet's been a big bonus for us. Indeed, or all these different ways to recruit, to find good talent. When I started, it was an ad in the newspaper. You know, that's really what it was, and because everybody had a newspaper back then, and you if you were looking for a job, you went to the want ads in the classifieds in a newspaper. And now, of course, we've got you got Craigslist, you got all of these different various internet platforms that are out there, which has been much more helpful. And then you also have, you have LinkedIn, and you've got the social media element. You've got the importance of having a good website that shows who you are as a company. I think it's time for us to maybe take another look at ours. I don't think you can look at it too often, right? Because what's changed, I think, for employees, and especially the younger generation, somebody in their 20s, they want to go where, one, they can make a difference, and two, they enjoy working there. It's the baby boomer generation went, which is the other extreme of all of this, where they went to work, leave me alone, I've got a job to do, and then they went home, right? Now we have people that want to collaborate. They want to have a team atmosphere. It's a little more touchy-feely, all of those things, which is great.
Yeah.
We want to embrace that. We've never used a recruiting firm to search for a higher level position. We are, Tori and I'm in my late 50s, and he's 4 years younger than me. The reality is that retirement's not that far out of reach for me. How do I retire? Well, I either have really great people to run the company for me, for us, or I have to sell it.
No.
Or maybe the kids can figure it out and do it and see if they truly have the ability. And they're in their 20s and they're still figuring that out. All of these things play into this. What's the next steps? And I'm interested in your world, actually. I'm interested in what recruitment looks like, the successes around it. We are notoriously entrepreneurial, do-it-ourselves kind of people, right? But I have an accountant, I have an attorney, right? I'm not doing those things because I'm not wearing those hats. We do have an HR department. I don't think you're doing your job as a leader if you're not looking at all resources all the time. And right now we are in a position where I think we need to look at some outside resources.
I like what you said earlier about the younger generation and the way they're kind of taking information in. One thing I would say is, today's generation, they're all about kind of consuming information through videos, through what's a day like in Lautenbach Recycling? Let's hear from some of your employees. What does that look like? From an employer branding perspective, I think that's super important today because a lot of other companies are doing it. That is a way they're able to attract employees. You could post an ad on LinkedIn, or even if it's a senior role, but the difference is going to be the people, right? Your people have obviously weathered a storm from the sounds of it, and they came out of it stronger. Should be able to represent that on LinkedIn and let the people see what a tight-knit kind of business you are.
I have a fear of social media, and it's unfounded. I don't have a reason why. My uncles were guys that were like, don't be showy, don't show off, just get the job done and go home for the day. Don't have the fanciest stuff. Don't have don't scream from the rooftops how great you are. All of those things, right? And social media is kind of the opposite of that. You're constantly trying to, I would say, show how great you are.
Yeah.
And I think you're having some mental social mental problems or health issues that are happening for a younger generation right now, where, the TikToks and whatnot, where they, or, and even Facebook, or Meta or whatever it's called now, where, who posts a crappy vacation where it rained the whole time and you had a really crappy time, right? Nobody, right? So the whole time you're looking at, whoa, oh, Judy had this really wonderful vacation, and God, I sure wish that I had that, So there's that all the time, right? So that's rolling around in my head all the time, and I really try to get past this braggy thing that I'm trying not to be, but that's my own insecurity, and that's something that I need to overcome, and frankly, let somebody else that's much better and to do it and roll with it, because I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
I think my thinking is wrong. I think we have some issues about the one statement I made around, the TikTok and people having unrealistic things of seeing what other people do. And that is braggy, but I think there's a happy medium. I just haven't focused in on it and really kind of asked somebody. One of the things as a leader, I firmly believe, is you got to find people that are better than you, right? And I need to find somebody that's better than me that handles that element for us in the company and utilize ideas like what you just talked about, because I completely agree with you. I am on LinkedIn, and I've just started to get a little bit more comfortable. I had this really great experience the other day. I don't post anything. I haven't. But we are now as a company just leaning into this. We need to have more structure around it, which will be helpful. But my son the other day put on LinkedIn that he started a new position with Skagit Soils as the manager of Skagit Soils. And I reposted it, which is like the only thing I've ever really done. But I'm connected to hundreds of people, right? And all of a sudden, it was just like this steamroll of things, of people congratulating and happy for him, and it's good to see. I put on there a proud dad moment, and the effects of it is definitely there, and I'm not opposed, and I need to embrace it, and I need to capitalize on it, just like what you said. And
well, thanks again, Troy, for joining us on the first episode of Trash Talk. It's been really enjoyable, great conversation. I really appreciate it.
This has been very enjoyable. I'm honored that I'm actually the first one, and hopefully did a good job and have some interest that people think that it was productive.
Absolutely.